Shudder's new documentary worth watching, or does it kind of have a curse of its own? Hey everybody, Ryan Reed here, and yeah, there's a new 5-part documentary out on Shudder, the streaming service. If you don't have it and you're a horror fan, you should definitely check it out. They're doing a bunch of free trials right now with everything going on. Obviously, I'm not sponsored by them, but it's just a service I really enjoy. Recently, they released this 5-part documentary that focuses on different films that, throughout their years of being developed and being released and all of that, have kind of developed a mythos to them that they were cursed, that these productions were cursed because of things that happen on set, unfortunate, truly tragic things like death of actors or production crew, and other weird incidences that have happened on these movies. And so people have kind of taken these productions and applied this sort of bigger idea that there was a force trying to stop them or things like that. And that's why they got the reputation of being cursed films. And what I gathered from this documentary is that they were trying to break down that idea and interview people from the set, people who were involved in production, actors, filmmakers, and also people who kind of have studied film in general or different historical studies or, religious studies or things like that. And they interview all these people and try to kind of break down this mythos, this idea that these films were cursed. And overall, I think the documentary works. I think that it stumbles really bad out of the gate with the first 2 episodes. First 2 episodes are on The Exorcist and The Omen, and you would think that these would be the most interesting episodes, that they would have a wealth of stuff to talk about with them because there are so many legends and so many things that happen on the sets of these movies and afterwards and things like that you could really talk about them. And each episode is like only 25 to 35 minutes, maybe like a little bit more, maybe like 37, somewhere in there. They're not very long. They're like half-hour episodes. So to really only have a short period of time to talk about each movie, which by the way, the movies are The Exorcist, The Omen, Poltergeist, The Crow, and the Twilight Zone movie. And so with only a short amount of time to talk about each movie, you would think that The Exorcist and The Omen, with this kind of legacy that they've built and this big mythos that they have because of the subject matter and things like that, that people would have a lot more stories. There'd be a lot more stuff to talk about. And there is, but it feels like they kind of shy away from it. There's big sections, without going into spoilers, if you do want to check it out, I do recommend it overall. If it's something you're kind of interested in, you can binge watch it in like a day. It's like 5 episodes, each like half hour, so you're looking at like maybe 3 hours total. It's not that long. But, the whole idea of these first couple of episodes, The Exorcist and The Omen, they take these weird side routes where they interview people that really has nothing to do with the movie or the mythos of the movie. And honestly, it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because it doesn't really feel like it adds anything to the series. In fact, it takes away from the stories of the people who were actually there or people who have studied this, this material, this subject matter. And instead, they just focus on weird random tangents that they try and tie in. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but like they try and tie stuff into The Exorcist, and the person they interview, it just was very frustrating to watch. Same with The Omen. They had some other stuff that they kind of added in as extras that just became very frustrating because I wanted to sit down and watch these movies dissected, taken apart, looked at, and say, hey, here's an incident that happened on set, or here's things that happened throughout the filmmaking process of these movies. And the first 2 episodes touch on that, but then they shy away from it. And it's a weird thing because, you'd think these would be the movies that they'd be able to kind of talk about the most. They have The Exorcist and The Omen have some of the biggest legacies for cursed films, and they're the ones that are touched on the least. However, once we get into the other 3 films, Poltergeist, The Crow, and the Twilight Zone movie, the things that they discuss, they focus way more on the movies and the incidents that happened during productions and people's views of them and how they felt. And it becomes a very human documentary, and that's really what I wanted. They interview people who, if you're familiar with some of these movies, the tragic stories behind them. And I'll say this up front, this documentary is not exactly a feel-good documentary. If you just want to watch a documentary on the making of movies or things like that, there are other documentaries to watch. This one definitely is kind of a downer. I mean, and I don't mean to make light of it at all, but it's not a lighthearted, enjoyable, dive into these movies. It's some of the stuff that happens is very tragic. If you're familiar with any of them, of course The Crow is famous because of Brandon Lee's death, the deaths of some of the actors on Poltergeist, and people involved with the Twilight. There's a lot of that, and they interview production staff and actors and stuff that knew these people and were involved, and it's very emotional. It's very heartbreaking. It's very devastating at times, and they don't shy away. I mean, there's some pretty, in the Twilight Zone episode specifically, be warned, there is some pretty upsetting footage that they actually show from the death. So be warned, this isn't exactly a lighthearted, subject matter, but it is fascinating to watch, and those 3 episodes really did exactly what I wanted, which is take these movies that have built this mythos of, like, for example, The Crow. People trying to tie the death of Brandon Lee to Bruce Lee, or, people talking about the idea that in Poltergeist they used real skeletons for the pool scene, and so therefore that led to all these deaths on, from the actors in the installments. And I was glad that the documentary, a very kind of open-minded approach, also didn't shy away from the true tragedies, and B, didn't try to make it something that was adding to this mythos. Instead, like I said, they try to do the opposite, it seems, which is strip away this mythos and just look at these tragedies and say, this is stuff that happened. And the idea of a movie being cursed is kind of a ridiculous notion, and really we should focus on the human experiences and how these tragic events affected the people involved, and what this filmmaking experience was like for those people. And I think it's a very, very human documentary. And I think that's important. I think there's a lot of documentaries out there that try to make these real life people that they're filming into characters and build a mythos. And it's kind of refreshing to see a documentary that tries to do the opposite and strip that away and just look at these events for what they are. So ultimately, yeah, Cursed Films I think is definitely worth watching. Again, be aware the first 2 episodes do not do what the rest of the episodes do. I think they really missed the mark on The Exorcist and The Omen, and that's a shame because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to these movies, but they barely touch on some of it, and then they kind of derail and go into these other tangents, and it just doesn't work, and it made me very frustrated. But I'm glad I stuck with it because the rest of the 3 episodes were very well done, and it definitely made it a documentary worth watching. Again, not exactly something that is super upbeat, but very interesting nonetheless. So be aware if that's your type of thing. If you're interested in kind of the history of these movies and you're not afraid to kind of watch something that's a bit more tragic, I highly recommend it, at least those 3 episodes, The Poltergeist, The Crow, and the Twilight Zone movie. If that doesn't sound like it's your cup of tea, if you're not interested in kind of that darker side and some of the more tragic things that happen, maybe skip this one. But if that interests you, if you're a film buff or you just kind of are interested in these types of stories, if you like crime documentaries, or if you like things of that nature, kind of darker subject matter, it's worth checking out for sure. But that's all I really have to say on this subject. So yeah, Cursed Films, worth checking out for sure. Not perfect, but an enjoyable documentary nonetheless. If you want to see some other impromptu reviews I've done, you can check out other movies on this channel here. You can also check out Fright Films, which is my horror movie kind of review show. You can check out some of my food reviews, all kinds of stuff on the channel. So please, if you enjoyed this and you want to see more, let me know in the comments down below. Like this video, subscribe if you're interested in seeing some other stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye.